Today's guest is Lauren from Boop Digital. Lauren, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Right before we start this interview, we took a couple of deep breaths together, and I really appreciate us just kind of calming down the nerves, tuning into the breath, and just like resetting because it's so important before we go into a conversation like this. And before we do, for me personally, before I do anything that I feel like really excited for, but slightly nervous for, a practice like that is really helpful. So, can you share with the audience and anyone who's listening kind of what we did? And we're going to talk a lot about practices, creativity, playfulness, some mindfulness and wellness techniques. But how would you describe the process that we just went through?
So one of my favorite ways to reset and just get back in the present moment is breath work. And so what we did is we had a deep breath in where we kind of had our hands like on our stomach so we could really focus on pushing the air into that area, expanding it as much as possible, and then holding it and then doing an exhale through the mouth and letting it be kind of slow, controlled, and empty as much as possible, kind of holding it. And then I usually like to cycle with a normal breath in between because I need the air. But doing that a few times and doing it really slowly and really like feeling into your body just makes you come back to the present moment and kind of reset everything. I do it before like big talks, but I also do it when I'm like feeling like a sudden kind of like panic or reaction. I just like to come back to my body and have a couple moments to reset.
Yeah, so important. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for leading me through that, and thanks for being here. So I wanted to kick off with a bit of a story as to how we know each other, and we essentially met through a mutual friend, Sarah, who connected us quite a few years ago. I ever since I moved to London, ever since I moved to Vancouver from London, I've been fascinated by SEO and Google and just wanting to establish myself within the wedding industry. I was referred by a friend to you, and then you've been helping me with SEO. And then since then, we've continued to connect. We've become friends, and yeah, we've what else? Like the masterminds as well that I was running during COVID or 2020, 2021. You're a guest educator
Yeah.
helping us out there with a guest slot on the SEO mastermind, which was awesome. And then we've had a few other creative projects as well, and some still in the works. So it's awesome to have you here. For anyone that doesn't know you, can you share with us who you are and yeah, who is Lauren?
Yeah. So I'm Lauren. I also go by Lo. I have I guess my first kind of business, my first baby is Boop Digital, and I run a digital marketing agency mostly for creatives, entrepreneurs, nonprofit, basically anyone that's making the world a more beautiful place, whether through their creativity or through their social impact. Um, the main kind of bread and butter of that business has always been SEO and like anything to do with Google. So like could be the free SEO or like the paid search side of Google. And I love data. I'm a nerd. So I've been doing that for a number of years and help people with that. And then I'm also a creative myself. So I definitely dabble in a lot of things, but I do a lot of painting, illustration work. I have a creative studio space in Vancouver in Chinatown that I'll be starting to exhibit at soon, which is conversation for later. And then when I'm not working, I love to be out in the mountains, love to backpack. I also am a little bit of a witch. So I love astrology and tarot and I love, music and records and making bougie cocktails for friends and yeah, dancing. I love disco.
Amazing. You know, one of the things that has definitely drawn me to you is just the abundance of creativity within you. Like you're into a lot of things. What's currently lighting you up as it relates to
Yeah.
your creativity?
I would say definitely my creative career has been lighting me up. I have been doing a lot of painting. Um, like the creative output's actually been a little bit crazy right now. Like I'm really focused on just creating a body of work. So, I mean, my friends are kind of laughing at this point because I feel like I'm creating like sometimes one, sometimes two paintings a week. Like sometimes they're even really large scale formats. And I'm also currently working on designing my own tarot decks. So I'm like halfway through the major arcana cards, and I have like the full intention of eventually like producing that and manufacturing that. Um, those are like really lighting me up, but also with Boop Digital, I've started doing like a summer webinar series where I'm just providing, webinar isn't even the right word. I'm like providing like master classes on certain topics that I want to teach on. Very much like no sales, just like deep dives and guiding people through like analytics and different like things to do with their website. And so I think what's lighting me up right now is actually just producing like a ton. Like I feel very in flow right now. And that's always the place I like to be in. Yeah.
So we're going to touch upon different creative aspects and the inner work of creatives. And you mentioned that you're in like a flow state right now.
Mhm.
You're producing and creating a lot. What would you say are some of the keys for you to help you get into that flow state and that help you stay in that flow state?
Yeah. I as you know, like I'm creative, but I'm also a pretty organized person. Like I have systems in place. So I would say definitely for the last few years, but really like in the last 2 years, I've been pretty serious about mindset and like making sure that I'm always in a creative space because if I'm not in that space, then it usually means I'm needing to focus a lot of my energy taking care of other areas of my life. I'm like in survival mode. I'm like, having to take care of myself. And when all of that kind of stuff is taken care of, then I'm like in what I call thriving mode, where all my energy is put towards creation and imagining and then putting that, pen to paper. So I am not like untouchable. I definitely have to like have a consistent practice in order to like remain in that state. And I can notice it like little things. I'm better now at like noticing little things right away where I'm like, oh, no, like falling off the wagon. Like, let's get back into good habits. So I have a daily journaling practice. My mornings are very sacred to me. I wake up usually, I'm like making my coffee. I do my daily journaling practice, which usually includes like a little bit of gratitude. I, like I said, I'm kind of like a witchy person. So I like to note where the moon is in the sky, and I like to write a little affirmation based on kind of where the stars are in the sky. And then I have my top three of the day. Like these are the things I absolutely gotta get done. And I also have like one self-care thing a day that I
Hmm.
have to assign to myself and one person I need to support for that day. So like I don't know, usually it's like send a text to this person or like just see how this person's doing. And
Hmm.
that's actually it. Like I used to like sometimes I free flow write or I have like prompts, but usually that's what I do. And it's really just like a good like 10 minutes, chunk of my time where I'm just like writing. I'm getting into like an abundant mindset with my gratitude and I'm like setting my intentions for the day. And I'm also making sure I take care of myself. And then yeah, I do like weekly meditations. That's pretty much it.
What do you feel like is maybe the one thing out of your whole morning routine that is the most essential? Like if you didn't do that, then
Yeah,
it could affect the rest of your day.
it's the writing practice for me.
Mm.
I think I don't, it's hard to explain. And we've talked about this before. Like I also have definitely been on a kick of like reading and or listening to a lot of those like books. Like I've recently finished The Artist's Way, and The Creative Act, and I'm currently in like a book club with some of my yogi friends doing yamas and niyamas, and I hope I said that right. And, I think in a lot of those practices, even they might come from different disciplines, a lot of them have journaling as like a practice. And I find it just helps me to like brain dump. It helps me like focus, but it also just helps me like, I think already first thing in the morning, technically doing something creative. I'm like putting my words onto paper. So I think that's probably the main thing. Um, it's journaling. It's like showing up for myself every day
Yeah.
through journaling.
And
Yeah.
in the sequence of events of what you do in your morning routine, whereabouts does journaling sit? Is it at the
Oh, like
beginning,
first
middle,
thing.
one of the first things? Okay, great.
Yeah, I like wake up, I make my bed, I make my coffee. As I'm making my coffee, I'm doing my journaling. And then like I take that coffee and I probably go and like start to get into my day, but I have to do it first thing. Otherwise, I'll definitely forget.
But
Oh
yeah,
God.
totally. And you mentioned that sometimes, you can notice when you kind of are going off track or there's something that
hmm
maybe would throw you off and say today you've done your routine, you're in a good space, we're having this interview, and then later on a message comes through or something that could
hmm
potentially throw you off and bring you out of that flow state. What's something that you do to retune in, get back into that flow state? Could you walk us through a bit of your process there?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's just like life learnings and also like going to therapy and stuff. My like current practice is when something like throws me off, I'm like giving myself the time to like feel it because I don't want to just like push something down or away. Um, and then I just really focus on being like, this is like not making it personal, this isn't, and then I do some breath work and I like reset because usually I feel stress or I feel like um I get overwhelmed easily, then it's usually like a feeling in my body. Like I feel like a tightness in my chest, or I'm like breathing like more shallow. So it's actually just really like taking the time to slow down, let myself feel it, and remind myself, like, this happens because crazy stuff in life always happens,
Totally.
like every day.
All right. So when we were connecting around this interview and setting it up, you mentioned something to me that like really stuck out, which was that around the idea of there's essential inner work that creatives really
hmm
could be doing to help them as entrepreneurs. Because
Yeah.
in life, there's going to be different challenges. We're going to have different things that will throw us off track. And without that inner work, sounded like it's going to be a lot more challenging to be an entrepreneur and to navigate life and business together because they're so combined as creatives.
hmm
So, what is some of that essential inner work?
Yeah, I will say I think pretty much what I've talked about is the inner work for me. It's really just about being present in the moment and making sure that like my physical needs are taken care of, my emotional needs are taken care of, and like my mental and all that kind of stuff is taken care of because running a business takes so much energy and time and you're always throwing curveballs. So it's really just about making sure that you have all of your needs taken care of so that you can actually show up from a place of like being well nourished. Like you just can't take care of things if you're always in a state of like overwhelm or panic. And I think, well, you can, but you'll burn yourself out, which like definitely in the early days of like being an entrepreneur, I think I was probably like constantly like, hustling and then burning out and then hustling and burning out. And now um it's funny because you can like look back hindsight and I'm like, I do way more than I definitely did then, but I do it just in a really more like intentional, like
Mhm.
slow pace. And it's truly just like the mindset stuff, the journaling, like I constantly kind of feeding myself like physically and like with good books and like good people and all that stuff, which sounds so cheesy, but it's just true.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Do you think as entrepreneurs and as creatives, like we have to go through those challenges and either burn out or be on the brink of burnout to learn the lessons so that we take wellness more
Yeah.
seriously? Or is it
I
or is
mean,
it something
I
that
I think about like a lot of because I work with entrepreneurs. So like all my clients are entrepreneurs and like I have the privilege of being friends with a lot of entrepreneurs because I think we all kind of just congregate because we're crazy enough to be entrepreneurs and like we enjoy it. Um, I think I do think that everyone faces burnout. And part of the kind of part of the challenge or obstacle of being an entrepreneur is that you will inevitably like have to solve problems in your business that like you can't necessarily anticipate. Like you will get the curveball, you will burn out. And sometimes like, just like that stat that's just always going around, I feel like where they're like, I don't even know what the actual stat is. It's probably not even real, but it's like 50% of businesses will fail within their first like 5 or 10 years or whatever it is, their first year. I don't know. There's always like that scary thing that's like going around for entrepreneurs. And I think that that's probably true. Like a lot of people probably start projects or initiatives or businesses, but the thing that actually just keeps you going is being able to learn from your mistakes and like you go through a period of burnout and you're like come out of it again, and then like next time maybe it's a little bit, the lesson's a bit scarier or the mistakes a little bit more expensive or whatever, but like every time you kind of keep showing up for yourself, that is like you also leveling up in your business. And so that's why I think mindset and inner work and like taking care of yourself is so like it's so entwined with business, because how how can you like face like the odds of potentially this like big investment in time and money in yourself, like constantly being at risk to fail?
Mm.
Like how can you keep showing up and pushing through that if you aren't able to do that in every area of your life? You have to like constantly learn to like trust yourself and like learn from your mistakes, and that you can't do that if you're just like not taking care of yourself
Yeah.
too. Um, yeah, I think no matter how much like money or good PR you have, like if the owner of a business is like a bit unhinged, like it's not gonna work out. So yeah.
But what are some of the challenges that you've overcome in the last few years, and how did you overcome that, knowing what you now know?
Yeah, I mean, first started, I think the first obstacle everyone typically has is like, how do I get more clients? Like, how do I get cash flow? And you're just like, that's your like number one stress. And then you kind of figure that out. And then you get to a place, I think, where you I think like probably like one of the biggest hurdles was starting to realize that like, okay, how do I think it's always just about like the first hurdle is worrying less about money.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, how do I like start to separate maybe like my time from the money I'm making? Like, when you're an entrepreneur or solopreneur, it's like, do I get to take vacation? Do I get to take sick days? Like, I think probably separating myself from the types of business offerings that I have that were like so tied to me being working 24/7 was the biggest hurdle, because I I have a lot of like underlying health conditions that like I have to work through. And so to a certain extent, I originally got into entrepreneurship because I wanted that life of flexibility. I wanted to like take rest when I needed it. I wanted to be able to travel the world. And this is like before COVID and like remote work was a more like widespread thing. I wanted to be able to travel and like be my own boss and have all that flexibility. But then you get into entrepreneurship and suddenly you realize you have way less flexibility and like you have to show up every day or like the bills aren't getting paid. So that was like the biggest hurdle, because um I had to learn. So I kind of went from taking on these like big one-off projects to then being like, okay, I have to learn to kind of redo my whole offering so that I'm actually having the kind of work day that I want to have.
Yeah.
So I went kind of to monthly clients from there. And then like even that has its own set of learning curves, like learning to, price yourself in a way that like is going to make sure that you're taken care of and that you can afford to like potentially hire help when you need it. Yeah, I think that's probably was the biggest learning curve early in my business. And now, um, the probably the biggest obstacle is for me like scaling and expanding my team. That's the one that's coming up next, is
Yeah.
like learning to hire and actually like like not outsource is the wrong word, actually like grow a team is probably my next challenge, which is actually just the next level of the same problem. So that's what I mean, like it just keeps coming. Like you put out one fire and you're like, oh, I'll switch my services, and then you're like, great, I figured it out, and then you're like, wait, now it's the same problem but like magnified, so I gotta figure out the next solution. But that's why I like entrepreneurship.
Oh yeah, it's really about being a problem solver for your clients and then even
Hmm.
yourself. And it's part of the lifestyle, really.
Yeah.
And what we started off with around doing that inner work, it can only strengthen you and support you, but then also it's also challenging in itself because you grow and you strengthen from that, you feel like you can take on more or you can
Yeah.
go for the bigger challenge. And that's when scaling and growing your business and all those aspects come into it. But then it's becoming, or at least for me, just becoming more and more comfortable with the challenges and almost accepting them, that they are, look, this is part of it. And
Hmm.
let's enjoy this process because this is the life that we essentially chose. Do you see it the same way, or how do you respond
Oh
to
yeah, absolutely. It's
continuous
absolutely a
challenges?
lifestyle choice. I don't know, like uh, again, I think that's why I like it. It's like ultimately I like solving problems and I am a creative. So this, it comes maybe with high risk or comes with a stress, but it's also like it gets me quite motivated. Like most days, not every day, but most days I wake up and I'm pretty excited about my day, and like I wake up today and like, cool, I gotta go do a podcast episode, and then I'm gonna go like check out this space, and then I'm gonna like work with some of my clients, like I'd say most of my clients, like I end up becoming friends with. Like I just because I work with people that tend to have very like heart-centered businesses or social impact, or they're just also people that live that lifestyle and make me so excited. And we just kind of feed off that energy. And so like I think uh that's what it that's what makes it hard, but that's what makes it worth it.
Totally. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So investing in your creativity, you're doing a lot of things outside of work. You mentioned painting and a few paintings
Hmm.
sometimes simultaneously, the tarot cards. How important is investing in those aspects of your creativity, things that necessarily aren't related to your work, but still allow you to explore, discover, create, and how does that impact your work?
Yeah. And this is like a pretty kind of recent thing or evolution, I guess, in my journey. I only last October finally decided to get some space that was like dedicated creative space. And as an entrepreneur, as like a marketer in general, like being in marketing, I have this like slightly wonderful, slightly toxic trait where I think potentially down the road I could monetize anything. And so, and I really took this space being like, this is not like, I'm not putting any pressure on myself to like be making money from this. Like I've got Boop Digital, I've got my marketing agency, that's like my career. But I really wanted to show up for myself this year and set the intention that I was like, there's going to be a space and I'm going to have like dedicated time. So at that time, I was like, Mondays and Tuesdays, I'm going to be in the studio. Like I go there, doesn't matter what happens, but I'm just going to go, I'm going to create because um, I definitely had just gotten to a point where I was so busy with my business and like all this other stuff that I felt like I wasn't dedicating enough time to my creative play, which is so important for me. That's what keeps me in flow. It's what keeps me like thinking creatively. So I started to do that and do painting, which actually traditionally I've never really like thought of myself as a painter. I've definitely thought of myself as like an illustrator, as a designer. Like I've done, a lot of logo and branding design. And I used to do art shows as like when I was younger and that kind of stuff, but I never really thought of myself as like an artist because in my mind, an artist was someone who like went to art school and then like that's the only thing they're doing. So there was actually a lot of like kind of like creative blocks I had to work through again, like with my mindset of being like, you know, you're an artist, like you need this. This is part of your life. So I started showing up like at least like twice a week to this like studio space that was like truly a glorified warehouse space. Like just go upstairs. I mean, I love it. Like it's really started to change things for me. But doing that really just started to snowball into other stuff because I started to just become like more creative with like boot stuff. Like I was like, you know what, I'm also gonna like spend a little time and like come in some extra days in the studio and like I'm gonna like design a boop digital like hat. I just want to wear a hat, which I'm not even wearing now. Or like I'm gonna just like tweak my logo. I'm gonna like work on my website. You know what? I'm gonna like write some of these like master classes for summer. And like I just started to be more playful with my business too. And then even the kind of painting and creative work, I just started being like, I'm gonna just produce, like no pressure on money, no pressure on anything. Let's just see, like let's just actually start showing up for myself and creating work. And from there, I started to realize actually how important it was for me. And I've actually been creating a lot, and now I'm getting an actual like artist studio and gallery space. And um, I've had, you know, started to make connections with like the art scene in Vancouver, which is so jokes because in the sense that I'm like, I'm not going to be too serious about this. This is just playtime. But like, I've really discovered that when I follow my joy and when I invest in my play, it makes me naturally enthusiastic. That's where the magic happens.
Mm.
So you end up just you should always follow what lights you up. And it's been a whirlwind and I've been really enjoying it.
Awesome. Congrats, Lauren. That's really incredible. And
Thanks.
yeah, so happy for you. And I feel there's a lot of creatives out there who love what they do. So if for me it was photography, and for others it might
Hmm.
be illustrating, designing, and we love it so much that we feel like we want to do it all the time. So let's turn it into our job. And
Hmm.
then the relationship with it kind of changes, and then you start to think about how you're going to monetize this, and how can you continue to shoot the things that you love if you're a photographer, and make money
Oh
from it.
yeah.
And then you start realizing that what the audience or the clients want isn't necessarily how you always want to create. So but you still
Yeah.
enjoy creating. So you're still a photographer in this example, and you're still shooting
Hmm.
and loving that. But then the side of you that was exploring and creating and playing before it was a business kind of gets lost in that
Yeah.
process. And I find a lot of creatives, and this has been true for myself in the past as well, is we end up not playing and we don't invite that into our lives. And you mentioned a few times you just started to show up for yourself, and you started to show up at the studio and show up in different communities, things like that. What is your takeaway for a creative listening to this who may not be playing or exploring or creating for themselves anymore? They're fully into their business and they gotta book clients, right? That's the big problem that's staring them in the face right now.
Hmm.
What would you say to them to inspire them to invite some play and creativity? Because clearly it's helping your business. Yeah,
Yeah.
what would your advice be to them?
Yeah. That's like that's so true. That's just like the perfect summary of like someone's journey in creative entrepreneurship. Because even Boob Digital, like when I first started thinking about starting that agency, like I was very much like in the creative. Like I was like doing a lot of branding, doing a lot of like web design projects, but also like, just doing a lot of the work. And then you just get to a point where you're like, huh, I spent a lot of time doing admin. Like doing a lot of accounting. Like I didn't want to be an accountant. I wanted to be a creative. And I think the key has been that it might not be as big as like I'm fully just gonna invest in this other second career because that's a lot. But like I think you need to find some alone time with yourself where you do make it like part of your schedule. You are consistent and you show up for yourself, and it's like not tied. It just has to be not tied to making money. And I don't think it has to be a big thing. So like actually before I got the studio, I started practicing with this idea. Um, I told myself every third Friday, I'm going to take it off and I'm going to take myself out on a little creative date. That's actually how it originally started, which I think you're probably like smiling, you recognize is kind of from like the artist way. Like you have to take yourself out on like a little date. That that is, I think, is something that you can start any kind of creative entrepreneur where whatever it works in your schedule. Like I started off doing that. And so one day I like took myself out to the art gallery. It's like I'm just gonna go. And once I just went and I looked at like a bunch of kind of like designer stores. I'm like, I'm gonna look at like, what's on the runways or like what's kind of cool in fashion. And I just made it the intention of showing like actually taking the time to step away from my business or step away from like my responsibilities with other people and be like, I'm gonna show up for myself and do something that's just playful and creative. Um, the key is that like not to put the pressure on yourself to make money from it or to somehow make it like part of your marketing. Like sometimes, you'll be like, this isn't something I'm going to do and be like, hi, social, like this is me, like doing it. Like try to really just show up for yourself in a private way where it's just play, I think makes such a difference because I think I bet anyone who listens to this and actually started doing it, like it would have a snowball effect. And the snowball effect's going to look different for everyone, but like it's kind of like when you set a timer for a task and you're like, okay, I'm going to just have 15 minutes of focus. But like typically, if you once you start actually doing that, you kind of just end up running a bit longer because you're like, you get into the flow of it. And like suddenly you go from not being used to it and it being like an annoying thing out of your schedule to then you kind of build a tolerance for it. You start being like, hey, this is a thing, it's a habit. And then you start craving it. And then you realize that like you need creativity and play to to do it. That's why you got into business in the first place. If you let that go for too long, then I think to a certain extent you lose that spark that you got and the reason you got into what you're doing.
Mm. Totally. You mentioned the snowball effect of that. So what has been some of the snowball effects of you taking those creative dates? What does that look like now? And what has been the snowball effect of that for you?
It's been wild. um, I've met a lot of people even through those dates. Like, I feel like because I'm doing this kind of weird thing, maybe I'm just like awkwardly like, oh yeah, I'm like taking myself out on a little creative date. And then you like have these weird conversations with people out in the city and like I've connected to people and then I've like shown up to like socials and kind of networked with other like-minded people, which always leads to like, opportunities to chat, to learn from each other. And through those connections, like I've yeah, I've gone to socials. I think I've had, invites to like show my art at different places. To like whenever I meet people, like sometimes it's like, oh, like be a guest on my podcast or like let's teach at this mastermind or let's do this thing. And I think if I'm always bogged down on the things I have to get done, then I'm never going to have the time to like think about the future and think about the collaborations and partnerships. I think that's the main thing actually is like the snowball effect has been you show up for yourself, but then you also start like showing up with other people, because
Yeah.
you build a community and then that community leads to like opportunities that I think if I was like trying to seek them out, they wouldn't necessarily even have happened. Like because you're naturally just being enthusiastic and talking to people out in the wild. Um, yeah, I don't know if you want specifics in what I'm working on, but
Let's get it. Yeah, like I know you mentioned an exhibition space. or working
Yeah.
towards that?
Yeah, I've got a new space I'm moving into in Chinatown. That will be kind of like half Boop Digital headquarters, half I think my name's gonna be LK Art Studio. That's what's gonna be on the intercom. And I'm applying for East Side Culture Crawl. I'm working on kind of eventually launching the website for that. I'm gonna start eventually being part of Vancouver Art Walk, which is like first Saturdays of the month. You can do like a free self-guided tour of like galleries all throughout Chinatown. So I'll be starting to like exhibit whatever I'm working on once a month.
Wow.
Um, I always have stuff on my sleeve, Sachin. I'm very slowly working on a manuscript for a book. I have my tarot deck. Um, I am also like going to be doing some traveling, so I'm hopefully going to be setting up some meetings in Denmark for maybe some art connections to like distribute art in some like interior design places that I really admire. Again, these are all like seeds, so I always feel a little nervous just talking about my seeds. But also at this point, I feel like confident enough to like talk about it because I have a track record of like proving to myself that when I do show up, like good things happen. Um, yeah, and that's all the art stuff, but like Boop Digital too, like I've got this like summer like webinar series. Again, I hate the term webinar, master class, I don't know. But I'm like teaching a lot. Part of that snowball effect was I started working with like kind of a PR agency networking group that also has like additional like kind of like guest posts and speaking opportunities
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. Um, I think once you get to that place where you're just like really excited about what you're doing and like you're like, you know what, I'll just dream a bit bigger. I'll dream a bit bigger. Like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, I think that's just my attitude now. I'm like, oh, the worst that's gonna happen is I don't get it or I don't do it. But also, if I don't dream bigger, it's not gonna happen anyways. So I'm at a point where I'm okay being a little cringe. Like, if people see me fail, that's okay. I've done it before. I can come back from it.
Yeah, nice. I love that because it's so much about leaning into the fact that if you do fail, like it's not really a failure. We're gonna
Yeah.
learn from it and we know we can bounce back. It's not the end of the world. And we can have another go and try again. And no one's like looking at each of us or you that closely where they're like trying to wait for you to fail. It's
Yeah.
we create all these like stories in our mind and think that people are judging us for this or that, but it's simply not true. And so you're doing a lot of things and you have like many things on the go. How do you kind of navigate your time or that feeling of like overwhelm when there is a lot
Hmm.
happening, different projects, different deadlines, client demands, your creative aspects, the playfulness?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, that's always the hardest question for me to answer because I get it a lot because people are like, okay, you've listed like 10 things you're doing. um, I think that, okay, so I do have systems in place. And, I didn't necessarily, not everyone knows this about me, but like I'm neurodivergent. So like I have ADHD, but I also have autism. And I these two sides of my brain, like I need systems in place to keep them in check.
Yeah.
So I actually consider these to a certain extent gifts because, the ADHD side of me is very like adventurous and wants to try all the things. And the autism side of me is like, rein it in. Like, you need consistency and a routine, or else this is never going to happen. So I think through actually navigating a lot of those like struggles, I've learned to create systems for myself. So, I mean, I'll tell you what they are. I'm going to sound like just so maniacal once I share this, but I and I've probably been doing this consistently for like the last few years. I spend time doing like a full mood board. Like I vision, mood board or have the vision for the year. And I, it's everything. It's not just business. It's like I kind of imagine myself. I'm like, this is what I'm wearing, and this is where I'm traveling, and these are the foods I'm eating. Like some things on the list are like very mundane and some things are really big.
Mm,
And I just really brainstorm, and I probably do that just like for like the first couple of weeks of the year. I'm just like have this long list. I keep it in like the front page of my journal for the year, and I'm just like add everything and anything. And like this is a, money doesn't define this, location doesn't define this. It's just like everything that would be like incredible if it happened. And throughout the year, if it does, I actually like cross it off. And it's been really cute to look in the last few years. Definitely not everything gets crossed off, but like a lot more gets crossed off than I always would expect.
yeah.
Which I think has also helped me realize, like, okay, yeah, you can do things, like you can dream bigger and bigger. And once I do that, I actually kind of like I map out like just the months of the year, and it's not like even deadlines. Like I'm very visual about it. I kind of plop them in. I'm like, well, okay, these things would be more fun to do in summer, and these things would be more fun to do in fall. But ultimately, the goal setting happens in a 12-week plan. So I work on 12-week cycles. So I will like, that's 3 months. It's like a business quarter.
Yep.
And I actually have it all in one. Like I don't separate them out. I'm like, this is like business and like life. So I'll actually plop like say I have like 10 different outfits I've imagined that I just see myself like entering a room in. I'll actually like plop those outfits into like the 12-week plan too. I'm like this 12-week plan, like I'm gonna, you know, I'm gonna be wearing this outfit. I'm gonna be like working on this particular project. And then I mean, on a daily basis, it's those top three every day in the journal. Like I genuinely go from like large picture to like year to 12 weeks. And then, I look at that 12-week breakdown and I start going like top three each day because I probably only get the top one done each day. But just having that system in place means that ultimately what I am working on isn't busy work. It's like
Mm.
going towards an actual goal that I want to do.
Yeah, I love that. It's so
Yeah.
intentional, and I love that it's something that you do at the start of the year, creating this huge. So you have your grand vision, you're bringing it down to the next 3 months, and then are you working in sprints within that? So like, okay, in the next week, this is what I'm doing, but it's part of this longer sprint or part of this bigger picture, i.e., the 12 weeks, which is rooted in the.
Totally. Yeah. So that 12-week plan, like I'll actually just like it's just a page in my journal. It's like 12-week plan, and I'll actually just number it like 1 through 12, and I'll put the date range. So I just know that's the week. And
Yeah.
I typically like the 12-week plan is like a bigger project, and I break it down by trying to get it done in 12 weeks. So like for example, in my current 12-week like sprint that I'm in, uh my main goal was like I wanted to be like doing this summer webinar series, or that wasn't even actually like the main goal. The main goal was I was like in 12 weeks I want to be producing like more content for Boop Digital that's like really long form, like more video content. That was like the big goal. And then in 12 weeks I was like, okay, I think I can realistically do this like once every like 3 weeks or once every month. So I actually put in the weeks. I'm like, during these weeks, like I'll be doing this like live webinar.
Mm.
Um, and I put even like the titles of them. I'm like, I'll figure it out once I get to that week. And then, so like the 12 weeks is always like, here's a big project that I keep saying I want to do. Because if I don't put it in there, it's just never going to happen. And then the numbered list of the weeks is like me breaking down all the steps that it'll take to get there. And I think it's a work in progress. Like I've definitely learned, like I have the tendency with myself or even with other people to a little bit to like overpromise. And so that was something early in my career I had to like work on. Like
Mm.
it sounds like I'm doing a lot, Sachin, but like I used to say like way more. Now I can realistically be like, these are the things I'm actually doing because I've already broken them down into steps.
Yeah.
But like I tend to be pretty generous with myself. Like um I really don't want to like have someone listen to this and be like, wow, I've just got to like hustle all the time because I'm actually not like that. I'm pretty sacred also about my like boundaries of rest. Like
Mm.
I don't work on the weekends. I just don't. No matter how crazy things get, I've had to really just learn like that I give myself longer deadlines to get things done. I also don't beat myself up if like I don't, complete the 12-week plan. I say, hey, wow, you've done a lot more. Because the reality is I've probably done a lot more just by putting it in that plan than if I didn't. So, I still take my weekends. Like I still like even the content, I wasn't like, I'm gonna do this every single week. I'm like, you know what? Like once a month is like a lot and
Yeah.
it's a new thing. So like I think the key is just actually taking things that seem intimidating and breaking them into smaller steps
True.
rather than like filling every single one of those weeks or filling every single thing. Like if you look at my yearly plan, I actually did a lot of work in the winter because I just know that I if I'm not productive in the winter, I'll kind of just be like, oh, I don't feel like I can go outside. But in the summer, I have barely anything planned. Like I'm putting on these webinars, and that's like the only thing I'm doing for marketing for Boot because I know me. I like the summer. I want to go to the beach. I want to listen to music,
Yeah.
and that's fine. That's just part of the plan because my plan isn't just business goals. It's also like living my life and having fun.
Totally. Yeah. And you mentioned like you're mapping out your business and your life, which includes creativity, play, travel, all
Yeah.
the art, everything that you love doing, which is awesome. And for anyone listening to this, it's really what I'm getting from yourself and other creatives, and even what I use for myself is having that vision and seeing it clearly as possible, to the point where you're just like so excited that that could be a possibility in your life. And then breaking it down and like really breaking it
Hmm.
down as small as you can, and then just working on the first bit, because now you're making a step, and then you work on that first bit, and then the next week you work on another bit, and just keep focusing on the week that's ahead of you, or the few days or the few steps that are ahead of you, and just making that the focus. And if you can keep doing that over 12 weeks, you could finish a project. You could make
Yeah.
a
It's
huge difference in your year and your trajectory and in your life.
yeah. It's so true. I don't know, like it's very much the mentality of like for vision wise, shoot for the what is it? Shoot for this. Oh, I think it's shoot for the moon and then you land on the stars. I've never really gone that way because stars are pretty far away, further away than sometimes the moon. But you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
you dream so big. Like if you come a bit short, you're still like doing cool things. You're good. Like we're here to have like a good fun life. Like, but ultimately also like don't let dreaming big stop you from making the first step. Like you just have to keep breaking it down into small steps. Like I sometimes my top three of the actual day, which is like the tiniest, most granular version of this, is like I'm trying to think. Like sometimes it's so basic. It's like respond to this email, and that's like one of my top three.
mm,
Like because I know like that's actually what is the most important, and if I don't make that take up like one of the full spots, like it probably won't happen. So I'll get caught behind. Like I do not, you know, make one of my tiny steps like the big project because otherwise, like you'll never get started. I'll be so
totally.
overwhelmed.
I love the practicalness of like having your top three and then like really prioritizing them. And something that I've really been leaning into myself lately is doing the hardest thing first, the thing that I'm like
Ooh.
neglecting, and just like getting it done. Because honestly, after that is completed, everything else seems way more easier versus
Mm-hmm.
putting the energy into other things. And then I found myself, like thinking about that really hard thing that I haven't done yet, and then it's more likely to get pushed to another day, and then you have like the guilt and whatever else comes with that, and then it's
Yeah.
there the next day. So it's like getting it done, and honestly, the rest of the day feels so much more smoother and easier because you've tackled it. So yeah, for anyone listening, if there's a hard challenge that you've got like right now and it's in your top three, definitely making it the number one out of the top three, and hitting that thing first after your morning routine or your journaling practice is great. Lauren, thanks so much for sharing what you have today. I'm super excited to continue to follow on the journey and see how this year and your vision and your creativity manifests. And for anyone who wants to stay connected on your journey, what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, if you are into the marketing stuff, the business stuff, it's boopdigital.com. and I have an Instagram handle that I'm sure Sachin will share all the links. And if you are interested in following me on my personal journey and also my artistic and creative endeavors, then I have my personal Instagram at Everyday by Low, and a website coming soon that Sachin can share the links for that too. And if you want to find me on the streets of Vancouver and come and say hi, that's an option as well. I'm pretty friendly.
Awesome, Lauren. Thank you so much for being a guest on Coffee with Creatives. And yeah, look forward to seeing you in real life very soon.
Yes, thank you so much, Sachin. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks, Lauren.